always nervous with stuff like this, I think.
You're nervous about just podcasts in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that thing of like that line from The Social Network where she's like, the internet's written in ink, you know? And so it's this thing of like, you know, worrying that I'll say something that will make me unemployable or somehow unlikable, or that'll bum out my parents if they listen to it, like that kind of thing.
How often do you worry about stuff like that?
I'm not on podcasts very often. so I would say, I mean, actually, I don't know. I think it definitely comes up when I think about like Twitter and stuff. Like I had my accounts protected for a long time and I just stopped doing that. So now.
Wait, is your Twitter not protected, like locked anymore?
No, it's not locked anymore, no.
Because like I was just looking at it just to be like, what's she been up to? And I guess I remembered it being locked, but why did you open it up?
I don't know, really. I think maybe possibly just to like get more instant approval from strangers, you know. But
get some of that dopamine.
I mean, yeah, and I think partly just feeling like nothing that I have to say is really that private. Like there's not really much that I need to protect, I hope, you know, like sort of just hoping for the best.
What were you worried about before? I mean, you said you're worried about saying something that might get you fired, but like we've been friends a long time. The only things I've seen you say,
not fired, definitely not,
or not
fired.
But
it's
like not once
I enter a workspace, people know what they're getting, and we either click or we don't. But no, it's not. It's more that like I've been in a position to hire people, and I don't think people realize how much people look at like your Twitter, your Facebook. Yeah. You know, like most people don't do really deep dives, which I think is good and respectful, but usually they'll do like kind of a skim of however it is that you put yourself out there. So there's just like a general anxiety about, you know, coming off a certain way or seeming weird or, you know, I mean, almost my entire feed is political, so, but it's mostly retweets. Like it's not me saying very much. Yeah. Like the stuff that I say myself is mostly just dumb jokes and puns, I guess.
What does the online version of you look like?
I mean, I think it's probably pretty close to how I see myself. Mm-hmm. I sort of lead with my cultural experience. Like I think I walk into every situation kind of face first as like a bumbling Jewish weirdo. Although I don't know, that sounds kind of. I think if I heard someone say that, I'd be like, "That person sounds annoying."
But you're not. But I don't see you as bumbling at all.
Oh,
I mean, it's funny
maybe
because
it's the wrong
it's
word.
like for it's
Jake is laughing.
It's interesting to hear that, but like when I think of you, when I look at your stuff, it is the opposite of bumbling. Okay. You are so sharp, funny, clever, intelligent, and have a take.
Well, I think most of my funniness, like most of my humor, depends on presenting myself in this way, like the unfrozen caveman, Amalia kind of thing, of like walking into every situation, genuinely feeling kind of like an idiot, and then hopefully having some insights into the way that things actually work. And then when I say the things that I'm actually thinking, you know, because I've walked into the situation as a mildly aware idiot, when I say something that's insightful, it has more impact than it might if you know what I mean?
You're setting people up to be wowed.
I'm lowering their expectations.
Yes.
No, I don't know. I think I met a woman once, another writer who I really liked a lot, and I've heard this from a few different people. They're like, "Oh, you say the most appalling things with the sweetest voice," and I like that was pointed out to me because I don't. That's not deliberate, you know? Like, I think I'm a nice person, and I think that I think appalling things, and so those two things together are going to result in that kind of persona, and I think I try to echo that as much as I can with my online presence or whatever. You know, like my Instagram's mostly just pictures of my dog and
your life.
And friends, it's mostly like friends and dog, and every once in a while it's like, I did a thing, look at the thing, you know?
Did you ever feel drawn to doing something else with your Instagram than just Because you're using it in almost an old school way of this is my life instead of this.
What's the new school way? Because the
new school way is I don't like. Certainly, there's a version of a new school of where it's like it's selfie culture.
I think most of the people that I know are not comfortable presenting themselves in that way, and I don't think that there's really anything baseline wrong with doing that, especially because it's kind of a way of owning your own body. Like I think especially for young women, I mean for a lot of young women it's probably just a way of responding to like a gaze that they need, and I get that too, like I've been there too, but like I think that for a lot of people, for a lot of young women especially, it's really about presenting yourself on your own terms, and existing in your body on your own terms, and kind of being like taking away the male gaze by turning the camera towards yourself, to get real lofty about it,
Do you not worry sometimes that is still participating?
Oh yeah, no, I think
it's like there is this. I think there can be a false sense of empowerment.
Yeah,
where it is like,
for sure.
Oh no, I love my body so much, so I'm going to show it more because that's what I think other people want.
So I would say that most of it is probably that.
Yeah.
But I think that a lot of those people, it's like I try to think about them. I try to think about the age that I was when I might have participated in that to some extent.
Yeah.
And, not like in a sexy bikini way, because I was never in that zone. For better,
the sexy
for worse.
bikini zone.
I mean, I grew up in a very cold climate. Also, really appalled at my own body. Like that was sort of just part. I mean, I think whatever. God, there's so many rabbit holes we could go down, Brad.
That's why we're here. We have the time. We're not. This is the.
Okay.
You contain the multitudes.
Oh, thank you.
To talk about these.
I appreciate that. Hi, Jake. And so
Jake is doing audio.
Yeah.
By the way.
I'm not just like yelling at the ghost in the room. Although I would if there was one here. If I detected one, I'd be like, Brad, I have something to tell you.
I would love that.
Okay, thanks.
Have you ever seen a ghost?
Oh yeah, I lived with one. I lived with one for a while.
Can you tell me about that?
I can actually. Okay, so do you believe in ghosts?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure.
Sure. I don't have a reason not to. I don't have a reason to.
Right. Okay. So I think we're probably in the same boat, which is that I believe in everything because it's easier and funner.
Yeah.
Lately, I've been feeling much more that we're like, in a really cool video game, and I'm really hoping that we don't get rebooted. Like it's like you walk through the world and you see things that feel like authorship. And I think I've felt that for a long time, of like seeing things or
like what?
Experiencing synchronicity.
Yes. What is like an example of something that represents authorship to you?
Anything that makes you laugh because you feel like you can't not believe in God as you understand him, it, her, they, whatever pronoun you want to use for God. So like I was raised in a monotheistic context, and I think that it's hard for me to shake that.
Judaism.
Yeah.
Yes.
So my relationship with belief is very much, it comes from feeling the presence of a God that is like just a benevolent, loving force who's not responsible for any of the shittiness that humans perpetuate against each other. Like the question of, why would God do that?
Yes. If there's a God, why is there all of the absolute most horrendous
And the answer for me, I mean, I guess I should say, like, my belief is very personal, and I'm also not that attached to it being true.
Sure.
Like if I found out that everything that we experienced was taking place in the fold of an elephant's ear, which is like something one of my history teachers said in high school, and it stuck with me. Like that would be awesome. I'd be okay with that. Like if I found out that everything that we're experiencing is taking place in a millisecond, or that we're like, whatever, some kind of experiment that's taking place in a test. Like that's all still very cool, and I'm okay with that. Like I wouldn't be crushed by any sort of potential order, I guess, or lack of order. Even if there's nothing. Like, that's okay too. It just seems less plausible to me.
Yes. Is that because you just don't feel the need to control? It sounds like, I mean, there's a level of surrender to that belief that just like whatever is. And sounds like a very peaceful place. Do you find that's to be more peaceful and happier?
I wouldn't describe myself as a peaceful person.
Sure. But I guess, I mean, this aspect of your
I would say that aspect feels pretty settled.
Yeah.
And I've tried to test it both with lack of belief and with like more belief or more kind of adherence to religion. And it kind of just comes back to the same baseline of like feeling taken care of, you know, feeling grateful, feeling like whatever order there is has a sense of humor, you know?
Yeah.
And so...
the ridiculous nature of existence.
Right. Yeah. And like, you know, I love science, and I love when we stumble onto science that kind of explains things that might be seen as paranormal, but I don't think that takes away the paranormal element of those things.
Right.
You know, so all of that is to say that I lived with a ghost. I moved into an apartment which actually is still, I think it's probably being completely overhauled right now. And it's in West Hollywood. It's near the Henson Studios. The Henson Studios used to be Charlie Chaplin's studio.
Right.
And he had a couple of like apartment complexes that initially were built as film sets. So he made some films that I don't think exist anymore, that took place in like bizarro, like fake provincial French villages. And I ended up renting one of the cottages in one of those places. And
I've been to that place.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was there for a couple of years.
Yes.
And for a while.
Lovely, beautiful, weird house.
Very, very strange place. Yeah. Really not well kept up.
Yeah.
When I moved in, there were all of these people who'd lived there. There were four little cottages. There were a bunch of people who'd lived there for decades. And they were like, just so you know, there's ghosts. And I was like, cool. So when I moved into the house, I sort of just, like, I tried to address the ghost directly as soon as I walked in. And I was like, hey, ghost, I live here now. So do you. I'm not going to bother you. I'm sure you're really cool. Ghosts get a really bad rap. I wonder why that is. It seems really mean. I don't know why. But I'll be really nice to you. We can be friends. If you have any problems, I'll try to be a good friend to you. And I
great positive right off the bat.
Yeah. And I remember saying this out loud. I don't know if I actually did or if that's just how I remember it.
Well, if you thought it, maybe they heard it.
That would be the hope.
Yeah.
Within a few weeks, I would get in my bed and I would feel a person walking in the bed, and I would feel the actual impressions of feet walking
in your bed.
Yes. And at first I was like, oh, my cats are being dumb.
Yeah. Not
my cats. They don't sleep in my room. So that was like the first kind of sign of...
What did you do when that happened?
I think...
Did you feel, I mean, was that scary?
No, I've never been scared of ghosts. Because I think they're nice. But the weirdest experience that I had was that I was in that same room, and like, you know, like maybe between 2 times a month or 2 times a week, I would get that same like walking in the bed kind of sensation. And I asked the other tenants about it, and they were like, yep, that's the guy. And I was like, okay, cool. And like, I found out a little bit more about the people who'd stayed in those cottages. And so Valentino, and like, just like people who'd been in Chaplin films, Douglas Fairbanks,
yes,
the Barrymore guy.
Yeah. John Barrymore?
Lionel
Barrymore?
John, I believe.
Yeah. The oldest one, yeah.
The swashbuckler.
Yeah.
And so it had this really weird history. And it made sense to me that there would be sort of like a kind of strange haunting to that place.
Yeah.
And then one day I was lying in bed and I was not asleep, and I got spooned by a very large ghost, and I felt like it felt friendly. It felt completely not romantic or sexual.
Yeah.
It kind of felt like there was this just sort of derpy vibe to whoever it was. And I checked, I was alone.
Yeah. What do you mean by derpy vibe though? Like, what does that mean?
Innocent, like an innocent vibe.
Yes.
Like the
like size, a nice hug from a friend.
So the size of it felt like it was too large to be a child, but there was this childlike kind of derp. Yeah. It was sort of like
a vibration kind of. You just felt it.
And my friend described it a little bit differently later, which I'll get to in just a second. So you've met Ben Morse.
Yeah.
Okay. So
still works on The Simpsons, huh?
He's one of the guys there. And he moved in for a while. Like, he lived there for a while. I can't remember what the circumstances were, but like I had extra space. There was like an attached, this very weird soundproof studio that this guy had built adjacent to the cottage that was also like cottage shaped, but whatever. Mm-hmm. It's like, I hope he didn't use it as a kill room. Who knows? Probably not, because, those ghosts would have probably been really pissed off. But so Ben lived in there for, I don't know, probably about a year. And one day we were sitting having breakfast or something, and he was like, hey, so have you ever, and I was like, felt a ghost? And he was like, yes. And did it spoon you? Yes. And so we had this like, and he was like, okay. And he told me the whole story of the night before, where he felt this very strange presence. And then he felt physically that he called it being down spooned, which is like when the creature isn't aware that, like, it's like he was like lying on his stomach.
Oh yeah.
And this creature came, this ghost spooned him, and he also felt like it was a very benevolent, like, not, like a
But he was being like more squished than like spooned.
More squished than spooned. Yeah, kind of squished. Yeah. And he called the ghost. He was like, he had kind of a Lenny vibe, from Of Mice and Men.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, like that is what I experienced as well. And it was like one of those fun, ridiculous, like finishing each other's sentences kind of, we've both been haunted moments. And, Ben is not a woo-woo guy.
Yeah.
And I'm not, like, it's like I have like bits and pieces of like my experience that I think are pretty hippy-dippy, but I don't wear them on my sleeve. Mm-hmm. And I don't seek out experiences like that necessarily. And so it was really special to be reassured.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years later, when I was no longer living there, I ended up going to London, just like for New Year's, because I had never been there. Well, I'd never been there by myself. Mm-hmm. And I went, and Jake was there, actually.
Jake?
Yeah. Jake was in London. He's from there. And then Ben was going to go meet his family in India, but he ended up getting this weird ticket where he had to stop in London, and then he couldn't get a ticket the rest of the way. So he ended up being there the same time as me. And one of the things that I was doing on that trip was researching a piece of fiction that I was writing about the history of like rebellion in textile arts. And I can't remember what the museum is called, but it's a fashion museum, and they had 2 floors, and on the second floor they had a whole, like, the first floor was just like costumes, and I took all of these pictures of like stitches and different parts of like fashion history. And then we went upstairs, and there was a room that had a photography exhibit, and I walked inside, and Ben was like staring at this picture on the wall, and there were a bunch of framed prints on the wall, and it was all silent film stars. Like, it was an exhibit about a photographer who took pictures of silent film stars. And there were a few pictures that were blown up to the size of the wall. So they were blown up floor to ceiling. And there was one picture that was a man who was sitting at a table, and then his wife was sitting behind him. And the wife was Mary Pickford, who, if you love silent film, you know Mary Pickford.
One of the biggest stars
ever.
And
just like a luminous, amazing person. And she was married to Douglas Fairbanks Jr.,
yes,
who I found out was the main resident of the cottage where I lived. And so it was a picture of Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks. And the thing is that Ben and I looked at this picture for a long time before looking at the placard to see who it was. And both of us just started laughing hysterically. And it was the most like bizarro, transcendent moment that I've ever had in relation to something supernatural.
Yeah.
Because we both recognized that that was our ghost. Like, he's sitting there, and Mary Pickford is sitting behind him, and she looks like she's kind of comforting him because he's so derpy. Like that is what it looks like. And I'll send you a picture if you want to share it with your listeners.
Yeah. No, we'll throw it into the cut.
Yeah. And it's a wonderful picture, and he looks like such a sweet guy, but he also looks like a huge, just friendly, guileless ghost who would show up and be like, you seem like you need a nice bear hug, you know?
So experiencing that, did that change your view of reality at all?
I'm glad you asked. Yeah. So my favorite piece of fiction is called The Aleph. It's by, I'm going to mispronounce this, Jorge Luis Borges. Sorry for butchering that. Yeah. But whatever. He's great. Look up all his stuff. Read all his stuff. He mostly wrote short stories. And he's got a really beautiful short story called The Aleph, which is about these two men who are rivals. One of them is the narrator, and the other is his poetic and romantic rival, who won the heart of the love of his life, this woman Beatrice, who never really took a shine to the narrator, but who loved this other man who is presented in a way that's like just a bloviating, insufferable dick. And it's drawn really well. Like it's like the narrator seems like he could use more redeeming qualities, but like the person that is painted as the rival it's just done in such a beautiful way. Because you just hate him. You just can't stand him. And you feel all the pettiness of the narrator. And the rival basically invites him over to his house, and he says, there's a point in my house where if you look at it, you see everything in the world happening, everything in all time happening all at once. Mm-hmm. And you have to I can't remember exactly what it is. I think you have to lie down on the floor and then suspend yourself upside down on some rickety stairs, and then you look at you focus on this one point in the near distance, and then if you look at that, you will see everything that has ever existed, everything that's ever taken place, all time, condensed, right? Yes. Everything condensed into one point in space. You just see it. And the story is basically about the narrator being shown that thing and not changing, remaining petty as hell, and I really hope that's what the author was going for. Yes. Thank you. Because to me, that was really a profound idea that as humans, we have all knowledge, I mean, not every, it's there's so many things that we don't have answers to, but there's so many things that we have some answers to. And we've come so incredibly far in terms of, producing beautiful things and producing things that are thoughtful and incredible. And somehow it doesn't change us, it changes us maybe incrementally. We evolve very, very, very slowly. But that's my hope, is that we can evolve quickly enough at this point in response to these urgent circumstances, yes, and survive. Mm-hmm. I'm really rooting for survival of humanity, because I feel like we're pretty cool, I
mean, there's a reason we're here. There's a reason we're what we are. Uh-huh. And yeah, you do worry that we're at the end of some timeline, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of complacency that's happened, and we've gotten more powerful than we maybe should be. Yeah. We shouldn't have the power to destroy our environment. That's so insane. Yeah. And the reverence isn't there either. And so it's a scary time, but also I do think, maybe the more you talk about it, for me at least, the more it seems like people are getting scared in the right way and getting activated. Yeah.
It's weird that that's the thing that is equal to hope right now,
What?
Hope becomes enough people being terrified.
Yes.
To act. And to say, we're better than this, we can do better than this.
Yeah.
I don't personally believe in extinction. I think that the existence of some sort of conscious, active population will continue. Mm-hmm. My personal hope is that it includes my nieces and my nephews, yes, who are awesome. Yeah. And really, when I think about it on a personal level, I think about how much I want them to live to be old. you know, and to have like human experiences and to have kids that also live to be old. You know, it's like, maybe it's selfish. I don't know.
It's not selfish. I mean, it's selfless it's not about you.
It's probably
about them.
neither. I think but it's not really about them that much either. It's more just kind of about recognizing something really unique and hilarious and good that humans bring to the table as members of the earth, and not wanting that to just get lost, you know, not wanting that to get ethered, you know.
Do you feel, I mean, I definitely feel like I have been cynical for a long time and then have just made the choice to not be, and it's better.
How did you do that?
I did it by falling in love.
That helps.
That's one way.
Sure.
Because seeing the utter beauty of another human being and how we're here for each other.
Sure.
And it's very easy to not feel like we're here for each other.
Yeah.
Like our purpose is to, as a collective, evolve, you know.
Yeah, but like I don't feel like we are a collective. I feel like we could be in some version of things, but like right now things feel so incredibly polarized, you know? And I grew up in Israel, sort of. Like I was there until I was 8, which is long enough to witness the weird infighting that existed between secular Jews and religious Jews. And like that was the first really intense kind of tension that I noticed between people, and ultimately it's the same polarity as exists in the US, where it's about progressive ideas versus conservative ideas, and there's plenty of overlap. Like there's, you know, it's like it's not binary, you know.
Yeah.
Like there's both ideologies in both sides, especially in Israel.
Yeah.
But the tension between like different groups of people who are supposed to be part of the same collective was more evident initially than the tension between Jews and any other culture, like, you know, Palestinian culture or any kind of Arabic culture or, you know, nearby countries.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I was not aware of the existence of Saudi Arabia until I was older.
Yeah.
You know, like it was more just kind of this amorphous conception of an other, but I didn't feel as much, like I didn't feel any real animosity towards that other as much as I felt towards Orthodox Jews who seemed to hate me for no reason, you know?
Yeah.
And luckily I've been part of, you know, it's like I know a lot of people who fall into that category of Orthodoxy who are wonderful and lovely and, you know, love me a lot and vice versa. But there are people on the fringes of every community, including the left, you know, where the narrow and aggressive way that they think just kind of bumps up against my hope for what people can be.
Right. There's an intolerance there as well.
I think that's a much more succinct way of putting it, yes.
Yeah. How do you handle situations where you are having an important discussion with someone who disagrees with you? How do you attack that challenge?
I'm glad you asked that question, because I feel like the short answer for most of my life is very poorly. Like, I think that just generally speaking over the course of my life, like, I really felt like I had the answers to people's problems, and I felt very excited about like rolling up my sleeves and fixing them, regardless of whether they were consenting.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I think that historically I've been very, very like invasive and very like patronizing in a way that I wasn't aware of. And so when I would bump up against a disagreement with someone, it wouldn't be about resolving it as much as it would be about getting them to see how I am right,
yes.
You know, and not like in an aggressive way,
sure.
but in a very like obnoxiously peaceful kind of like, oh, you know, which is worse in some ways than just like yelling. And so I feel like that's something I'm still figuring out.
Yeah.
And in the relationship that I'm in now, like it feels we communicate in a really similar way, where, you know, both of us are sensitive people, and we're pretty aware of each other's, you know, like just kind of the subtleties of each other's responses to things.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I really like about his response to conflict is that he brings it up right away. Mm-hmm. And like he'll say,
very useful.
Yeah. And he'll say like, are you mad at me? But he won't say it like 1,000 times a day. He'll say it when he thinks that I'm mad at him. And so far he's been right, you know? And so I'm able to respond to that in a way where I know that he's interested in kind of leaning towards resolution as opposed to leaning further into the conflict of things.
Exactly. And or letting things fester, letting them grow. Yeah.
Yeah. And like I'm always aware of like just how much therapy has just completely changed our generation's ability to communicate about this stuff in a way that's almost clinical, you know? Like I think something has been lost, but I don't know how much value there was in the thing that was lost.
Sure.
You know, like by which I mean like Sicilians throwing glass at each other.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, it's like, the old ways are the old ways, but I mean, just because we're so intellectualized about our psyche, I you know, it's clinical, but also helpful.
Yeah.
Being a witness, understanding how your own brain works and witnessing it instead of participating in it is always going to be better. And that's cool.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about the way that you talk with people you disagree with. You said, like, where does that come from, I guess, that want for someone to hear your take and know that you're right? Where do you think that comes from?
Partly it comes from like all of these points in my life that I've been pushed to evolve or become better as a result of something pithy that someone said. And like my mom and dad had like moments like that in their lives too, where they're like, well, when I came across this challenge, you know, my mentor or my parent or whoever told me this thing, and then after that I was a better person. And so over the course of my upbringing, I collected those things, and I continued to as an adult.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of partly this misguided savior sort of feeling of like, oh, you have a problem, I have 12 different answers for that based on all of the knowledge that I've acquired. And so partly it's like maybe like healthy self-esteem that gets warped into something a little bit too presumptuous.
Sure.
You know?
But the intention is to be helpful.
The intention is usually to be helpul. I think
when
it's not
right.
Well, if it's based in an argument, then often it is to be right.
Yeah.
But if it's not based in an argument, like if it's just a friend coming to me with a problem or just somebody talking to me about a problem and wanting me to listen, like I always like, you know, the heat-seeking missile in my brain goes straight towards how can I fix this? How can I be the person who fixes this? And then when I fix it, I will be more valuable to this person. Yeah. When it's like, if they're coming to me and wanting to talk about stuff, I'm already valuable to them. Like right. I don't have to prove it in some extra way. So all of this stuff that I think is very baseline, like built into people with healthy pathologies, like I think I'm just coming to it now.
Something to bring it back to social media, actually, you, as a friend of mine, for at least 8 years, I have seen you as someone who is unafraid to call out behaviors online, or just things people say, maybe not even behaviors, but you have called people out about some toxic masculinity stuff, body shaming stuff. You also did something that I was just remembering prepping for this interview. I was posting about Charles Bukowski.
Oh yeah.
And I was very turned on to him. That was the part of my life where I was very living in his stuff. I mean, and I didn't know about the negative aspects of his work. Mm-hmm. And you were like, hey, watch out for this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's possible to enjoy his work and to enjoy his writing and to really see something special in it, and also to be aware of what a what a piece of work he was,
right.
you know. I'm not as bothered by the body of his work as I am by men who latch onto him as some sort of beacon of like the be all and end all of like poetic thought, because it's like, no, there's really like that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg. And if that's what gets you into, you know, beautiful prose or poetry, then awesome, you know. But if that's where you stop, and if you like, I think I met a lot of men who were like, well, he's the best guy, you know. And it's like,
why is he the best? It's like, why? Like,
because that's who they found.
Like, right, that's like, who. What is he speaking to? He's speaking to this very sad, rough part. Well, I mean, the point I was trying to make was less about Bukowski, but was more about the fact that you changed my perception. You actively did it, I mean, in a way that like
if I can get one man to stop idolizing Bukowski, I have done my job on Earth. No, I mean, I'm glad. Like, I think it's tricky because I think that on one hand, I have been really pretty good about calling people out when I notice that they're veering in a direction that seems potentially hurtful or just gross, you know? But then when I think about like the entirety of my life, it's like, I feel like a lot of it has been fear about speaking truth to shittiness, you know?
Yeah.
And you've been there for that part too. And so I don't know. I feel like I'm still figuring it out, but I'm glad that it's had some sort of impact, you know? Can I bring up a topic that's unrelated?
Sure.
Okay. So when you started veering towards like feelingsful work, I became nervous and worried because I've always known you as a person who is so deeply funny and is so good at like caricaturing what's ridiculous about people's pain in a way that's like not disrespectful to that pain. And so I've always I feel like I've always appreciated the weird, hilarious poetry that you bring to the comedy that you do. And when you started posting like poems that were not funny, I was like, oh no. And so that was part of why I sent you all of those poems that to me were like really deeply funny, because I was like, no, Brad, just do this thing that I want you to do. But I'm curious, I want to know about sort of like the impulse to be more, not sentimental, but like just more, to try to depict your experience of serious feelings with seriousness.
Well, I realized that a lot of my comedy, I was not doing it for the right reasons. It feels more honest to talk about these things. I thought about the things that were important to me. I thought about the things I'd been doing for the longest, which was writing poetry. Yeah. And that poetry, the best part of it until now has been, for 20 years, I've been doing this just for myself. And it's not very funny. So I was like, that's meaningful.
Well, do you think of it as a craft the same way that comedy can be a craft?
I think that my new pen is connection and deeper connection.
I don't feel any attachment to your persona or to your performance. I feel attachment to your writing that you just happen to be performing the entire time I've known you. Yeah. So the performance and the persona were not, I don't want to say expendable, but like just secondary or tertiary to the substance of it, which to me was really about understanding, like your comedy worked for me because you understood the hilarity in deep sadness and in damage and in, you know, kind of weird like impulses and youth and desire. You know, it's like there was a tremendous amount of substance in the subjects that you covered and in the topics that you let yourself dive into. I feel attached to that, you know, like I feel attached to the characters that you created, and I, maybe selfishly, you know, like I don't want that to be lost in your pivot, you know, like I don't want you to lose your ability to like world build in your poetry. Like, I want you to fold that into the poetry if you can, and to fold the humor into the poetry in a way that people seem to manage to be able to do really beautifully. Not all the time, but sometimes.
It's funny. I feel less funny.
You do?
I do. I feel more connected. I feel more spiritual. I feel more thoughtful about all of my actions and all of my intentions. And so what does that mean? I think I've kind of stripped away the need for that sad clown to be such a big part of my life.
That's good. Yeah. I think that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, but I do appreciate you saying that, because it's,
I guess what the main thing that I'm saying isn't don't do the thing that you're doing. I feel like the thing that you're doing is really valuable and cool and very open-ended right now. I think my hope is that you don't lose sight of how much insight and beauty and poetry you brought to the comedy that you made, you know, and that it's all connected. It's not like pivoting doesn't necessarily mean, like, I understand pivoting away from the artifice and from the performance and from like inhabiting characters instead of figuring out who you are and being yourself. You know what I mean? But I would urge you to not throw out the baby with the bathwater long term. If you need to do it temporarily, great, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I'm getting closer to a confluence of all of the gifts that
I love had. That word. I'm glad you used it.
It's, where I'm headed is a combination of empathy, spirituality, comedy, hosting, connection.
Yeah.
And helping other people tell their story, but also being a bridge, like you have been to me.
Oh, great.
Towards thinking a little bit outside of the tunnel that people are in.
I mean, that sounds amazing. I think because we live in California and like we're all in this kind of mode of like really aiming for a kind of lofty self-improvement that is very easy to make fun of. Like, I think there seems to be this invitation to kind of burrow in with you, and I think there's sort of a fear or hesitation about that because, you know, and I might just be, you know, I'm mostly just talking about myself here, but I'm like, I am afraid of self-seriousness, you know, and that loftiness. I feel like I'm definitely worried, you know, it's like I'm afraid of being judged for it. And so much of my life was like, I just took myself way too seriously. So I think I was in the opposite camp maybe, and that might be why I'm...
Are you afraid sometimes to drop your kind of, your humor, your cleverness?
I don't see myself as clever. I do, like, I think I'm afraid to take myself too seriously and to veer into condescension.
Yeah.
You know, like, I think that I equate a certain, like, I don't trust religion or belief without humor. I don't, like, I feel like the presence of humor in a person, in an ideology, in a piece of writing, in a television, like in everything, is the thing that makes me trust it, you know? And I don't mean like cynical humor. I mean like warm humor, like a specific kind of humor that feels very grounded in like the ridiculousness of being a human and the fact that we're all in that ridiculousness together. Like, that's what makes me trust things. And so when you strip that away from an experience, then all I can see is like a degree of seriousness that makes me nervous, you know, because I'm like, that doesn't reflect my experience or my perception of the world. It's like the world as I know it, humor is just bleeding onto and through and out of everything, you know? And so if you take that away, then you have self-seriousness. And like that kind of like almost fascist level of believing your own correctness.
Yes.
And that makes me so nervous, you know?
All I want is to continue knowing how dumb I am.
That's so great. I would,
because I don't. Condescension does go. This is a trail. Spirituality is a trail to condescension.
Sure.
Absolutely, can be.
Yeah.
And the more I talk about it, the more I sometimes I'm like, I'll have a conversation with someone who's just way too into it and way too confident about it.
That's the thing.
And that is a place where why I also like this is because I know that I can bring a bridge, a level of I was there, now I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm not, here is not that much better, but it's working for me.
Right.
So if I can share with you and also learn from you.
Sure.
That's why I like doing the show. And the question I didn't get to, things that you do to connect yourself to you, because you give time for yourself.
I have been in therapy for years, and it's been incredibly, I really wish everyone could do it. That's what everyone says, and I think it is the truest thing. Yeah.
If everyone just tried it, there's a few things that if everyone tried a little bit, that the whole world would get better.
Acupuncture, I think, is really a thing to try. It doesn't work for everyone, but it's really worth trying, and I think it helps a lot. And also just sort of like, again, especially for women, like taking control of your own experience of like just Western medicine, and making sure, like for me, like I was diagnosed with PCOS when I was 18, and
what is that?
It's polycystic ovary syndrome. I think 10% of women have it. It's like very, very common. So many women that I know in animation have it, which is crazy. And it's basically just like a hormonal metabolic imbalance. They're trying to rename it because the name is not accurate.
Sure.
It can be very damaging to people, but there's this very wide spectrum of how much it affects you.
Yeah.
So it's mostly just purely annoying. But the more you know about it, and the more you know about how it affects you, and the more you're in communication with other people who are going through it, the more you can kind of take charge, because there's been very, very little research done on it because only women get it.
And it's not making people enough money to treat it, probably.
It would if people paid attention,
right.
Because it actually is the primary recorded cause of infertility. Yeah. For better or for worse, like there's a tremendous amount of money being poured into that. Yeah. And I think that it's actually a thing that can be mostly mitigated by, diet and exercise and supplements and stuff. Yeah. And like just kind of getting yourself synced up with your own
self.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the most important thing to you in your life, Amalia?
Connection.
Mm-hmm.
I think E.M. Forster has this line in Howard's End, which I love that book, and he just keeps coming back to this idea. He puts it in quotes, just like only connect. And I think if there is something that feels purposeful to me as a human, then that's it. Like if I boiled it down to one tiny molecule of purpose, of action, then that would be it, I think. And the way to do that for me is mostly through like humor and actual regard for people. Yeah. How about you? Do you have
It's the same thing.
Okay, yay!
love and connection.
Yeah,
but connection is a manifestation of love. It's just you're caring about someone. And it doesn't mean like love. It's like you have love for that person, and so you're going to connect with them.
Yeah.
And see them.
Right. Yeah.
And hopefully help them out if they need it.
Right, but not against their will, as I have done. So.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for asking me a question that's important.
Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you for answering it.
I'm so glad we're friends.
Me too.
Yeah.
We did it.
Mm-hmm. we kept it going.
Yeah. So far, so good.
Yeah, so far, so good.